Welcome to AIDIY. Today we're talking to Jake Taylor at Jumpcloud about all things AI and design. Wherever you are, thanks for watching or listening, and thank you, Jake.
My dad built custom log homes. And so he's a GC by trade, and he has been for the last 30 years in Durango. My uncle Charlie had a couple businesses established, but one was sleigh rides in the winter and then dude rides in the summer, either 2 or 4 hour rides. And so, yeah, so I grew up riding horses and doing dude rides in the summer, sleigh rides in the winter. I grew up cutting hay and baling hay and, stacking hay and all that stuff. And then on top of it, on a job site. So I was pushing a broom as soon as I could push a broom. I was carrying logs as soon as I could carry. And that actually was one of the things that drove me into tech. So
Wait, why is
I,
that? Or tell me more. What do you mean?
I was, 13 to 18 on job sites, I'd say. All of my uncles who worked for my dad at the time, a couple distant cousins, already had bad knees, like going into their 40s, and they were just beat up. And it seemed like they were, it's just that sort of the impact that all the physical labor for all those years that kind of has on you, right? And immediately, because I grew up bucking hay and cutting hay and doing all those things, I was like, I don't want to do this for the foreseeable future. And so I got lucky, moved up here in, I guess, 2002 and went to school at the Art Institute, graduated with a split degree of sort of code and design. So it was a multimedia degree at the time. And that kind of set me up for the rest of the career.
That's super
Yeah.
interesting. You know, it really lands with me because, Keith's heard this too often, but I grew up in South Texas digging water wells and doing a lot of like irrigation work for farms and plumbing for old ladies in in South Texas. And, you know, it played a huge factor in the focus on college. And, my grandfather always used to say these things like, hey, do you know why you're doing this now at 13 or 15 or 18? I'd be like, yes, grandpa, I know that I need to go to college and get a degree. And, I don't want to be doing this until I'm 40. Like, that was the whole point from his point of view. Now, in hindsight, I kind of wish I was a plumber. Like I actually still, think about how amazing it was, like bringing water out of the ground and helping people and jobs like finished clearly. Like you knew if it was still broken just by the fact of like, did it turn on? These things aren't quite so clear these days. you know?
No, and I mean, and we see it throughout the industry that especially anyone who's been in tech for a while, they start to strive for something more tangible or something, whether it's safety or just different. Because at this point and at this stage, and we're going to talk about it, but it's it can be anxiety inducing of just how fast things are moving, how unstable some companies may feel. Some companies may choose to lay off for no good reason with, 10 years at the company or whatever that looks like. And so, yeah, it's a natural, we see it across the board of, well, am I done here? Do I have a future here? How appealing is it to do something different? And a lot of people switching and they found, some find success.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I have questions about like what that shift has been like at Jump Cloud, but for people that, are listening and may not know, would you mind talking a little bit about like how you got to Jump Cloud? Tell us a little bit about what you're spending your time doing now that you're not a contractor.
That I'm not swinging a hammer. So yeah, so Jake Taylor, Senior Director of Product Design at Jumpcloud. I've been at Jumpcloud for 5 years now. I lead a team of globally distributed designers. So I have folks in India and Turkey and Mexico and then the States. And so yeah, so we're focused on, continuing to build out the product features, new products within the platform and things of that nature. My sort of journey to here, so I graduated, like I said, in 2006 with that multimedia degree, landed my first job right out of school at a local company called CQG, which is a stock and options trading company. And so I was working on a trading platform. The cool thing about that job, and especially starting, right out of school, is they had just signed three senior designers from Frog Design out of Austin. And so this was 2006, 2007 when Frog Design was really just, the boutique agency where it started, not the juggernaut. It's huge now. But that's really where these more experienced, more sort of seasoned design leaders from Frog of all places that I got to learn and cut my teeth into to really focused and intentional UX design.
And so for people that may not know, like, tell us a little bit more about Jumpcloud. Like, what are your customers? Why do people choose Jumpcloud? Just to give some
Yeah,
folks context.
yeah, absolutely. So Jumpcloud is a IT security platform at a high level. Essentially, we manage identities and we manage devices, and we manage the access governance layer between identities and devices. And so within an organization, if your organization is using Jumpcloud, you have an identity, which is Eli, and you have Eli's computer, which is your device. We want to make sure that only Eli has, access to that device. And then anything that Eli needs access to through his work and productivity, we give you the right access to those applications. And so that's either through SSO or we do software management, which we distribute software directly to the machine. And then as an IT admin, they're able to put a bunch of conditions and logic and policies against all of those different sort of objects within the system. So, they can't access, if you go to China, for example, and there's a block on China specifically, if the device shows up in China, you're not going to have access to certain things or anything at all. So that's really sort of the crux at a high level. Our user base is everything's from SMB all the way up to enterprise. So our bread and butter when I joined was all SMB focused. So anywhere from 1 to 10 mom and pop shops to 50 to 200 sort of up and coming or established smaller companies. And now we've gotten into truly more commercial and more sort of small medium enterprise solutions, which shows that we've been able to scale, we've been able to accommodate the needs of sort of all of these sort of ICPs. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun designing for the knowing that we're supporting SMB. It's also, I mean, it's really kind of blows your mind that we're able to support hundreds of thousands potentially with same product.
How is your team supporting that platform? Like, what's the role that y'all play?
Yeah. So I lead all of design for the product within Jumpcloud. So my team is distributed across the verticals and then paired essentially within a region where we can for the projects and the upcoming features. We follow a three in a box model. So every feature or project should have a engineering lead, it should have a PM lead, and it should have a design lead established before anything else happens. So someone will have a concept of something they want to build. As part of that concept being approved by senior leadership, it needs to have the three in a box established, and everybody needs to sort of be on the same page to even kick off a project. So designs thoroughly embedded from the beginning of the project, which is always that's always been the goal, and you hear a lot of that. The different struggles, I think, across different environments where it's like, oh, design was brought in 3/4 of the way and they want us to just spit shine something. And it's like, well, no, that's not how we should be working. And then two, the the practice itself doesn't work that way. Like we need to wrap our head around the problem to be solved, the end solution we're actually going for, and all the good things that make our discipline what it is.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a old talk. I think it's from 2015, 2016, from a guy named Paul Adams. He was the VP of product at Intercom at the time, and now I think he's CPO there now, and I think they've rebranded to be named Finn or something like
Yeah,
that.
they did.
And he had this excellent talk called "The End of Navel Gazing in Design and Product." And like, what quote that stands out, he talks about how everybody's like saying design needs a seat at the table. Design needs a seat at the table. And he like cuts to like, wait, we are the people that have made tables. Like, and so what I love about your three in the box model is just like you're making the table, you're giving everybody the say, you're bringing them together, and that's what facilitation is. Like, that's all the parts of design that I think are outside just UI. Like,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, to take that a step further, I think if you do have a seat at the table, how you secure your seat or you make your seat stronger is with that business perspective on top of the experience perspective. I think the industry as a whole tends to value product managers, VPs of product, things of that nature. And when you walk it backwards, it's generally because they're always coming from a stance or a perspective of supporting, well, we're here to support the business and then we're here to support the users. And it's like, well, we have that same talk track if you can leverage it the right way.
So this is the book that is currently, on its way on my reading list, and it
Nice.
ties to this business point, right? And it's called Inside the Box, David Epstein. If you've read Range, I won't belabor it, but like his take on design or creativity has always resonated with me. And how constraints make us better. I got recommended from a friend that was like, look, like you talk about design constraints all day, but there's business constraints, there's ethical, they're like, you kind of over lump these things together. And so I just want to underscore like the moment I was comfortable, especially working with people like Keith who have raised serious startup money, are thinking business model from day one, are thinking business logic and how do I handle payments and finance. And, I remember it being 2015 and first working with Keith and being like, wow, like I'm getting better because I have all this like information.
Well, and if folks aren't paying attention, large companies and small companies all favor all of what you just said. So,
Right.
have
Super
you
top down. Yeah. All
yeah,
across.
have you ran your own agency? Have you done fundraising? Have you started your own startup? And again, when you like zoom out, why is that? And it's like, well, sure, you could be a designer, but you also had to have some sort of business sense to be able to go tell the story and tell a good enough story and have a good enough vision to get funding. Or you have to have a good enough business sense to run your own agency. And we were just talking about going through like the budgeting cycle and stuff like that. Like those are the things, and then those designers, if they have that experience, they're not on the market for long. They're able to, parlay that into, the job that they wanted or the next big thing that they want to chase or pursue. And I think from a hiring or, leadership business example, like there's no stronger proof than having some of those things on your resume.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm biased, right? I'm a designer by background, came out of architecture school, linked up with Keith to build a startup together. And that took me down UX, UI, kind of the full gamut of digital. And I feel like I believe more than ever that sort of multimedia or interdisciplinary designers, right? You think people are like facile in many mediums, like, analog, digital, video, text, people who can sort of code switch. When I hear the rise of the solopreneur, or I hear about AI is going to enable businesses that, are worth, unicorns that have one or two people. And I always think subconsciously, or kind of my inner monologue is like, I bet they're going to be a designer. You know, it's someone who finally can connect like creative capability. Maybe the agents help them understand business model approaches and how to formulate these cases, do something that's sustainable, repeatable, enduring, has leverage, can scale. Because historically, so many of those people, at least in my relationship, as creative as they are, never thought that they could go there.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I'm curious if you're seeing, you talked about how your team can submit ideas as a result of AI and features along these veins of what LLMs bring. Are you seeing more? Like, is are there more ideas coming out, or what's the feeling like there?
I mean, I'd say across the industry, That's very true. I think a lot of you have to be motivated, right? And you have to be hungry. I think with a lot of these things, especially AI and education and learning about the different new things as they come out, is all it goes beyond a 9 to 5. If you think you're learning and you're done at 5 o'clock, you're like, oh, done learning today, done working on design. That's there's signals there, right? And it's like, is it just a job for you, or is it actually a living? Is it something that? And that's what I try to encourage my team about more is, I have a Rolodex in my head of experiences that I run across every day. And I'm trying new software I don't even need. I'm just exploring the software just to see, like, oh, this is something new. What did they do for onboarding? What's the design like? What's the style? Like, where does it fall down? How much do they really care? And you build up, this encyclopedia of, experiences and things that you rely on. And I do it kind of naturally at this point because I care. Like, I care about good design. I care about furthering my skills. I care about like getting more knowledge. And I think it's a harder thing to teach, is that kind of that hunger and chasing. It's more than a it's more than a 9 to 5 in the majority of these situations. So
Mhm.
Yeah, I like to think of it as, like, curiosity too, that, like, this might not be the thing the person is curious about. Like, I mean, if anything, like, being so curious about tech, I find it eminently reasonable if you wanna go learn about anything else,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like, I totally see where that would come from, but in tech, it's like, yeah, there's this deep curiosity, and, like, just a quick funny story, like, I taught my four-year-old I was trying to teach her this lesson. I told her she could press any button, and she friggin' pressed the red button in the elevator that calls the fire alarm. 'Cause I was trying to teach her you could just press anything to learn what it does. It was like and that is, like, literally how I live my life, and I did not adapt that well for a four-year-old.
That's
But
funny.
anyway,
Well, it was the shiniest button, right?
right? Well, it didn't happen right then, it happened, like, weeks later, and she's like, "You said I could push the button," and I was like, "God."
Now, I'm reminded of another, like, there's a local Coloradan named Melissa Ayers. You might have met her, Jake, in the past, but she's longtime Boulder and comes out of the DevOps world. And I was talking with her about this dynamic recently, where Keith and myself both had left jobs right at the transition coming out of ChatGPT. We were meeting, seeing what was happening, and we were like, we have to be in this. And so we just took that liberty, took that risk very early. And I was telling Melissa about the stories of like what we learned, some of the punches we took, and some of the issues with these LLMs early on. And she was kind of, you know, I would say jokingly, but also earnestly saying, look, these lessons have been earned in blood and sweat from the transition into DevOps, even prior transitions, that whole Agile manifesto. These changes have happened in the industry, and it's like we're, you know, forgetful. We've just left it all behind. No one's running a good change management program. If they were, I feel like they would be the talk of the town. If it was
Well, and I think I feel fortunate starting my career when I did, and not, never really knowing it, right? But when I graduated, I was heavy into Flash. I was heavy into action scripting 3.0. I swore I was going to make a living off of Flash and action script. Like, that was my jam, like motion design. It's bringing things to life, and then all the early, designs that we were doing, especially at CQG in 2007, was all Photoshop.
Mhm.
And you have to keep curious about the things. And so with Flash almost immediately got sunset after I graduated. I was like, well, there goes that dream.
I've met a lot of people like you. I
Say again.
I said I've met a lot of people that are like you,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
learned Flash and went all in.
And because it was great, you could bring a lot of ideas to life with motion and cool interactivity. And then everything that we started with, in design was always Photoshop. And, you're screenshotting or you're dragging elements or doing whatever. And even with Photoshop, like you could have the custom filters that you could find online. You'd have to search. There was really no centralized place. There really wasn't YouTube videos out to learn things. And so, if you built your own site, you're up, you're breaking your own site and you're responsible to fix your own site. And so you can't be scared to continue to break something, fail, fix it. And what I see now is that there's just either a hesitancy to be curious enough, to Keith's point, to be curious enough to try the things, be willing enough to spend the time to fail. And then even further is to be able to learn enough to fix it. And this is a time where we have unlimited resources.
Yeah,
Like
really.
back when I started, there was no, I was lucky to start with the group I started with, but there was no channels, there was no meetups in Denver, there was no YouTube videos, there was no design Twitter, right? Twitter just had came around a couple years later, but now they're all at your fingertips. I mean, you don't have to pay for courses. It's all out there. Most of the courses you want to pay for are already stale because, the next version of GPT came out or Claude or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah, the pace is just insurmountable. I mean,
it's
we're
crazy.
we're getting paid to stay up to date and implement the latest capability for a couple of customers. And even right now, while we're recording this, GPT 5.6 just dropped. And so I'd love to pull it up. Like, I'm curious what you guys think of the benchmarks. We could even scroll design Twitter a little bit and see what
I'd be
people
happy
are.
to talk about it, but I'm out. I'm just gonna say this. I hope this goes live. I am
Yeah,
out of Codex credits. I'd like them to give me more.
right. Yeah, please reset our credits.
How dare
Yeah.
they say try my new model for another 200? Okay.
Yeah. It's just so hard.
It's
Clients are saying, "What's the best way to do this?" And I'm oftentimes, really trying to avoid being pigeonholed as a salesperson or an account person because I am a designer, get opinionated and contribute. But it's oftentimes reversing that question and saying, "Well, what's best for you?" This is so contextual. There are so many nuances to that question. There is no silver bullet ever. As exciting as AI is, I think I'm seeing a lot of people realize, like, yeah, I could learn it, but I'm also seeing that it's not going to, replace every ounce of what I have to do. I still have to be button seat, still have to participate. And there's this disenchantment that kind of starts to happen with it where, well, why learn it if I'm still going to have the job or if I have to do the thing. So
and I
maybe
get
apps
the
are one of those things too. People are just disconnected, man. They're
yeah,
distracted. They're, you
and
know,
I get the other side of it as well. Like these are still scary times in the industry, and designers and I think across product orgs or engineering orgs, we're being asked to do more and more. So I 100% get I'm burnt out. I don't want to do anything beyond my 9 to 5. But yeah, I mean, these is one of those things that it's not a fad. It's not going away. Uh, the more you can enable yourself now, maybe you can get out of the situation that's causing you so much burnout. Is kind of how I look at it.
Yep. And to me, the pace is just drastically faster, and it's especially hard if you're not moving as fast as everybody else. And I don't want to sound like pretentious in any way. Like it's not like a skill thing. It's just like you're either on the train or you're not. And it's literally like the equivalent of like I took a train or I walked. And it's like if someone's on a train, it's like yeah, they're gonna get there way faster. And if you're on that same train, you can work with them. But it's just yeah, people have like really weird opinions on. I don't know, man. This is the first time I've ever worked in anything that polls less than that, like has worse polling than the United States Congress. Like that's hard to get to. And like AI is less popular than Congress. That's crazy. And I'm starting to see it day to day in like the last 2 months when we've been doing this for 3 years. Like that people are just like starting to be like, I feel like I don't know. There's tons of different frameworks around this, but it's like people kind of go through the 7 stages of grief, like whatever you want to call it, about adopting it. There's like a framework there of like I feel like people are going through a path I've already been down, and I'm just already on the other side going, it's over, man.
yeah. Well, we're here to lend a hand. We'll help pull you up. I wish that we could lay the bridge behind us faster, but anytime I get near the big, meaty change management problem inside of our clients, we're like, oh, what does our contract say? It says technologists. It says, we're not given that permissive responsibility to answer a lot of the bigger questions that I think you might be encountering with, like, say, a team of 30 designers. You, and so I would love to ask, how are y'all approaching it? What immediately sparked my interest when we first met was hearing how you all are adopting it. And I think it'd be great to talk about some of those dynamics, and maybe that'll connect to some stuff I can screen share
Cool.
as
Yeah, let's do it.
maybe,
Go ahead.
I was just saying, maybe just kind of walk us through, like, what types of objection handling are you doing? And, like, how are you handling that? How do you answer some of the questions of when or what? I think it'd be
Yeah.
great to know.
Yeah, absolutely. There wasn't, and I'll clarify real quick. I don't have 30. I have 17 designers.
Sorry, 7.
Or all good. But
Still so
I
much more than us.
don't want to toot my own horn too much. So there wasn't, so with the objection piece, there wasn't a whole lot of objections. So I started within my team. It was a year ago in April. We had an AI design jam internally. And this is when tools like Replit, V0, Bolt, and others were out.
Yeah, Lovable taking over the airwaves.
Yes. Yeah. And, we didn't have the design system in place that we have now. So we weren't necessarily using Cursor, and we can get to that piece as well. But so I started planting seeds early with my team, and then I jumped into it as deep as I could because I knew that this was a game changer. Like you said, we've seen moments like this in tech before, and so spent dedicated time with the team, telling them to dig in, go pick a tool, figure out what you want to build and build something. And then we're all going to present. And then we're going to, I'll do a recording of all of the screen shares. And then, we'll share it with the company essentially. So that started about a year ago with that effort and the planting the seeds. The rest of the organization started to catch up, I'd say, towards the end of 2025. And so engineering was all digging into Cursor. We also started getting our Cursor license, I think, at the beginning of the year. And so we were, from a business standpoint, they see all the efficiencies gained. They see all of the, whether it's true hype or, real hype around, AI and what other companies are doing and, what LinkedIn says and stuff like that. And so we didn't have the objection piece, but what we did have was just a huge change management piece to wrangle when you have across product and engineering, somewhere around 350 people to enable to all get on the same page, to redefine our PDLC process. Because, anything previous to this, some of it sticks still, but a lot of it doesn't. And so for us, that was a big sort of turning point. And yeah, and then now we're kind of at the stage of continuing to do enablement and evangelizing and sort of solidifying or streamlining the approach from there.
Can you talk about what you all kind of landed on? It sounds like Cursor won out, which is what the design team interfacing with. We fought with Replit, with all the systems. Coming from a design background, I was always trying to see what could I interface with the engineers at the right altitude that I like. Because the moment design projects got into system handoff, documentation to developers, it was always so painful that I would try to get into a leadership position to delegate it to another designer. you know, that just wasn't my jam. I was the UX broad strokes journey and service mapping type of person. Although I had the technical chops to prototype at a high fidelity, and execute Figma to production. And so how has that move to Cursor shaped the design team, or the design team shaping Cursor? What kind of creative stuff are you seeing there?
Yeah. So when it came down to sort of the evaluation process, like I was a heavy user of Replit until the models got good enough to lean into, the right IDE using the right
Mhm.
model.
Same.
I loved Replit. Like that's the one I decided to go deepest on. I don't know the true reasoning other than I just thought it was the strongest at the time. But then when it come to applying it at an organization level, you start to worry about our proprietary, code, IP, whatever that looks like, being hosted or held right in a third party service. And so I don't even know how much those were explored. And with engineering going all in on Cursor, that gave us the door open to continue to get licenses and get go with the flow at that point. I can share. And by the way, I still think Replit and others are still, kind of kicking ass. It's
Dude,
just
I love it. I'm a Replit stan from very early on,
Oh, I'm
and
just like I loved it too. I was really happy to use it with Eli. As an engineer, I'm usually the engineer that tries to pitch these types of things to people. And good God, if I could not show that thing to an engineer without them being like, "Whose computer is this? How are we
yeah,
getting into
where's
this?
the VM? Yeah,
What do you
what's
mean?
going.
Yeah, what do you mean your SSH into this?" Like, dude, people would freak out.
It was a good prototyping tool at the time, and you know, I remember early on thinking, why is Replit better at what it's doing for me than Lovable, and why did Cursor feel unattainable at that time? And I put a lot of cycles into this kind of like, what was the block that prevented me from getting to the terminal, which is where I am now. I'm not even in the ID, you know. And I know that's a whole long arc, but what was the blockers? And it was these words of like, I've never done that before. I'm not capable. I don't know enough about X. And eventually, I think it was right around 4.5 that kind of turned from November 2025 into the 2026, right there at the winter, where like Agent 3 had come out, Opus 4.7 or 4.6, 4.7, 4.8, GPT 5.4 to 5.5. There was just a capability leap that the past 6 months, the models are so good that I can leave the interface and go to the terminal has been a big shift. And kind of what I want to talk to your team about, of like, I think y'all are here and I want to learn more, but I think you're kind of here and like, I'm over here with Keith in the, fairy tale engineering land that's pretty amazing. Uh, And I'm still figuring it out.
yeah. I agree. So I have the same sort of sentiment. I think it was because again, the models weren't at the state of you being willing to take something. They weren't good enough for you to go on your own without the harness associated from Replit or from Bolt or whatever. It was still sort of in the dark finding your way. And some of us just weren't there. And when you have a platform like Replit and they just give it all to you on a nice shiny platter, I think that appeal was there, and that's still where they've seen probably the adoption and people, they're doing great as far as what I can tell. So
Yeah, I would say that it's also just like the models got like whatever the actual metric is that defines this is like certainly up for debate. But at some point, people started trusting them to do stuff that they kind of knew how to do, but didn't know how to do all the way. Like, and it started finishing those tasks like correctly. So, like, I think an example of this is like just to prepare for this podcast, I took an existing site that I've been working on and I made a storybook, like brand component guide for it. Right. And I just was like, just do this. And in the past, I would have been like, I should talk to Eli. I have to make sure I am doing this right. And it just did it and it nailed it. It got it all the way up. Like, it looks pretty good. Maybe I have some nitpicks here or there, but it got me so much further than I would have ever even tried to go myself as an engineer. And I feel like engineers are the most angry when people come into their space. So everybody else is a little scared to go into the engineering world.
it is. Sorry, I just had this switch. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it does blur the lines, right, Keith? Of are you a front end dev? Are you a back end dev? Are you a designer? Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's a weird thing too, because like I would say, like, even junior and senior kind of comes into play where it's like it's not what does it mean. I think that there's still like a very clear definition there. But like when someone comes to me, like I don't know. I used to always be the guy with an idea that was like, we should do this. We should do this. Right. Especially when I was younger at companies. And, my bosses would be like, go fuck yourself. We're not going to do that. But now if I show up, like people will and I've had this happen to me where I'm working on a project and someone comes in and goes like, I think we could do it like this. And they complete the whole feature except for some shit that I know they didn't know about anyway. Right. Like, but they did the completed idea that they presented to me. Now that doesn't always work, but it's weird how someone can come and bring something to you. Like, I don't know, like the line can be challenged very easily. So you have to actually be purposeful in like what you're telling people. You can't just be like, oh, we're not going to do that because of time, you know? And that is a lot more stress, I will say. And I couldn't imagine doing it at scale.
And the barrier for entry to do those things has gotten, almost non-existent, right? Like now, I think that might lead us into the design system, but like now there's no reason not to explore the random, crazy, you know, could take a year idea when you have the right building blocks in place. And so, big shout out to my principal design engineer, Barack. This is his baby. This is our circuit design system. We so when you think about it, most design systems they live in Figma. We do have a Figma for where we started essentially, and then we built this full like comprehensive storybook in Storybook. And so now what we've done is we have, all your standard components. We have the buttons and we have, all the different states and all the variations and all the things that you could potentially have. But what makes this really work is we have, specific rules and skills for Cursor or for Claude that follow our direct design patterns that we have in the platform. And so that's where the real power comes from. Uh, the more like you can make it feel like, a real world application, the better it lands with people, the better and easier the story is to tell. So just for example, I did this took 5 minutes. That was literally what I was doing when we jumped on the call, Eli. I was like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
trying to wrap a few things up too. So if I launch it by itself. So, this looks like a full working, functioning product, right? For just context, this is what Jumpcloud looks like. So this is our new homepage. So if we go between the two, it's like, well, that's so you run into a little bit of issues like this is too real, which we've always ran into as
They're
designers.
like,
It's
"Which
like, oh,
one am I looking at?"
yeah, ship it, it's done. But Barack has done a really good job. The designers have done a really good job of, we're matching the product in its state today. We're enabled to build against, using the building blocks that we have. We're not creating random styles. We're using, consistent design tokens. We're using consistent pattern tokens. We're using all of the right things that allows this type of prototyping function to happen.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I'm curious, it looks like are y'all following what, like, atomic design principles for your design system? It looks like you had atoms that form molecules. Is that how y'all are thinking about it?
Yeah, loosely, I would say. But yes, yeah, so atoms to molecule, yeah. We just started to get this granular around it and starting to, dig deeper into sort of that flow. But
And then my other question on the skills is how much fidelity is like too much fidelity? Are you thinking of skills at the component kind of level, or you said patterns? Are you finding any benefit to write skills all the way down to like the buttons? Where do you start or stop?
yeah, so they're essentially page level definition within the skills. We have example like page layouts in here somewhere. that also guide, some of the way that the pages get configured. But we found, and Barack and I kind of dug into it a little bit because he was going to go down that path that you're mentioning of component level skills associated. It turns into, and we didn't go too far with it because early explorations, it turns into a lot more to read from the LLM standpoint and a lot more to get confused on rather than guiding at the higher level and using sort of frameworks or layouts to plug and play the elements.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that I would agree with that assessment for sure, because code is text too. It's just not text for people, right? And like I think a big virtue of Storybook is that it kind of lays out what the LLM is trying to do in a way that doesn't like bog it down. Like if you try to build the whole app like with Replit a lot, it'll half build a lot of shit. Or now it does that a little bit less, but it like tries to build a lot of shit because it's trying to get the whole context of the whole app. But I feel like my experience in Storybook is that it like very much isolates the components and makes them testable, right? Which sucked to do when it was just me, like typing it, right? But now it's like if the AI is aiming for that state that Storybook is aiming for, it's actually a real. That was gonna be my next question. Is like, how's the handoff to engineering with this? I imagine
Yeah,
it's not that bad.
no, it's not. And I think to that step you just mentioned, we have a separate skill to allow for the components break apart. So it
That
it
is not.
yeah. So how it works, we have either existing backend logic or we have, if it's a brand new feature, there's no backend logic and they're going to tie it in as we do the handoff. But traditionally, right, if we were just to hand this off and it didn't have the storybook behind it, or it didn't have the components behind it, then engineering is going to very granularly sort of chop out like we used
Mm-hmm.
to in Dreamweaver and grab these blocks. And then they also have a lot of questions around them, right? They're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what's the state for this guy? What's the three other states for that bar, right? Because now it shows green, blue, red. Like, is there another state? And
Yep.
so
What's
what,
it look like? What's an error
yeah,
state? Yeah, you just
what,
get into
yeah,
all of it.
what
Yeah.
are the notifications? Yeah. And so with this approach and with the skill that we wrote, which is, I think it's like prototype to pieces is what we call it. It's the last step that you run when your prototype is in the handoff stage. And then it breaks off and it creates stories within Storybook for each of those components within that project folder. And then there's no guessing anymore from an engineering side of the states are associated like within that component. And so then they know like, oh, all I got to do is tie in the data source and this whole thing should populate based on whatever the conditional logic is.
So my next question is going to seem somewhat unrelated, but I swear to God, it's related. Like everything you just said feels like it would cut out all meetings you were having in the past. But my question is, has that actually happened? Because it has not happened for us. Like we
I
still
don't
meet about stuff, you know?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, we can always be hopeful, right? But no, from what I get, the team doesn't meet any less within their project groups. The changes and the iterations happen fairly, quicker. So that's less of a turnaround time. Whereas I used to fight for if we had, deadlines and, whoever dumps a page and a half of feedback, well, we're not doing that overnight. Like we need at least 24, 36-hour turnaround time, depending on the changes that need to be made. And now, you don't like the button's a bad example, but you don't like that button there. Let's move the button over here, which we really shouldn't be moving button placement anyway, to be consistent. But those types of things, it's done. And then so the other piece of it, and Keith, well, I think both of you, maybe we didn't discuss this, but we have it established. We have a portal essentially that we can then launch these prototypes into. And so what that gives us is a potential shareable URL that we can then use to socialize. We also have the optionality to add customer emails to those specific projects and then we can invite them through user research. We can embed that in the invite, and then they can walk through the functioning prototype in a live, look and feel and behavior kind of situation.
Awesome. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I think,
How far away do you think you are at Jumpcloud from designers just contributing straight to feature development? Why storybook, or
yeah,
how are you thinking about it?
I think if we so right now we're undergoing a large initiative to enhance, some of the legacy portions of the platform, and we have sort of the straggler older design system still floating around. So associated with those things are, older code potentially. As we get the platform more upgraded, AI, doesn't like fragile old code, and I don't want to set my designers up in a, failure state of like, the engineer doesn't, you know. So I don't think we're far off, but there is, I think we're moving at a good pace where we are now, middle of 26. Kind of hit my goal as far as being able to quickly prototype, be able to work with PMs, and PMs can share their initial prototype. We pick it up, we clean it up, we can facilitate the engineering handoff. I think we'll let that sit and we'll continue to refine and get better. And I think we'll naturally move into the state of, whether we've earned the trust or we've earned the knowledge on our side. Because you got to think too, as a lot of organizations, these are traditional, designers who were living in Figma 6 months ago and now haven't touched Figma in a couple months, but are still very much early in their journey of learning code of, and the ins and outs.
I'm wondering if there's something that has to do with the organizational model of, let's just call it a creative team to a engineering team, that might be shaping some of like the organizational destiny. Because I was talking to a leader from a marketing firm, mid-size, they do a couple million a year, and more the creatives, if you are familiar with the kind of ad and marketing world, it's so siloed, right? It kind of goes through all the different views or lenses. They're really struggling with, people consuming other people's responsibility, right? All of a sudden, the creative copywriter now can make visuals, and the person who used to be the visual designer can now make a product. The person that was a product designer in the marketing world now can then be, a slightly more technical engineer. And it's fascinating how that's kind of, that tension or those edges are like happening right now. I think your approach is very, one of the more measured ones, I should say, that I've heard. It's like I like that, earn the knowledge. It's like Dunning-Kruger effect, where all of a sudden people think that their capability is much greater than it actually is. But I think we've all treaded into that, because of
Yeah.
AI.
And I mean, I'm fortunate at Jumpcloud, there is respect for the disciplines. And so I want to keep, I want to be respectful of the other disciplines that are in place. And, we also don't want to encroach, whether it's the front of the process or the end of the process, right? There are orgs, like to what you mentioned, there's design engineers who are leading product initiatives, right? That are handling everything from the product strategy to designing the element to shipping the code. And I think those smaller organizations are able to do that because whether it's out of necessity, because they're staying small, or they have the general ability because their platform was written so recently that it's all AI code written anyway. And so, like anybody at that point could jump into that code base and, with the right guardrails in place, they can ship code, easier. I think us who we have a platform that's been around for a while, those are, that sort of motion is a lot harder to come by.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing designers stretch into engineering, of course, but also seeing them stretch into copywriting, marketing, business roles. I think absolutely people, which we need that, I think. We need requisite diversity of experience because the person that always ran the marketing campaign a certain way, there might be a better way now, right? Or maybe product management techniques need to grow and evolve. And I did want to take a chance to show a little bit of this new Claude design to Claude code connector, if I can take a moment. Maybe this might help connect to like designers who are just now getting Claude turned on for them. There are some new capabilities about, and a part of why I think it's great to talk about Storybook is that Claude Design has obviously adopted Storybook as infrastructure, for lack of a better term, in the same way that how Shad CN just started showing up in all the system prompts. So everything looks like Shad CN because of some Silicon Valley 20-year-old's taste, or several of them. Storybook is obviously following the same trajectory. It's kind of becoming just a native part of Claude Design, which I think is exciting. And so I thought it'd be cool to show you what I'm seeing, see what you think, Jake. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
let's check it out.
something, maybe it's something that's coming, to y'all. So I've just shared like my Claude Design window. And for people, I guess, that don't know, maybe what I'll actually do is share how to get to it because it's changing every day. So, what I would love to talk about is like this little side project I've been doing that's called Mundial.buzz. It's all about the World Cup that's going on until July 19th. And so, X had released a new API for real time X activity. I knew I wanted to do something with 3D, make it interactive about the World Cup. And this project started as a Claude design file and has now moved to a fully deployed product. It's available on fly.io, right? It's up, it's out. And you can go to mundial.buzz right now and see it. But I want to talk a little bit about how I'm using this to demonstrate Claude Code's ability to sync with Claude design. And I say that order important, it's important in that order because I think a lot of designers are going to want to go from Claude design to Claude code, but that's actually fundamentally against their recommended approach. So I just want to like do a quick demonstration to show because I fought this for like 2 hours and I was like, I wish somebody would have just told me. So what happens, right, in Claude code when you've got this open, you can see all of your projects, all your different discussions, so on. But to access Claude Design, you can't get it from the normal interface. You have to toggle over to Cowork and grab it from the bottom. It actually opens a separate window. So I'm going to shift to that one.
I thought we were going to do a round of applause because they had the insight to build a connector between their own two products.
Right. I wish so, but you can't really navigate between them. Right. And so you see here, they're pushing you to a couple of optimized outputs, right? It can make prototypes, it can make slides, documents, wireframes, animations, pretty much anything. The animation feature, if you haven't played with it, Jake, is killer. You give it emotion, style, tell it what you want, and it's like soup to nuts, some of the best, CSS transition animation stuff I've seen in a long time. But so we've got a couple of my existing projects here, and I'm going to mainly talk about what Claude Code and Claude Design Connector is really offering is that Claude Design will manage your system, but it's not going to manage your components per se. So whenever you come in here, I'm going to switch over to mundial.ui, which is the system that I had generated from my Claude Code project. And Jake, I think you'll see this looks very familiar.
Right.
That's Storybook under the hood right there. That
Mhm.
column So whenever you run /design-sync, Claude Code will send this latest to Claude Design. It will update the system, including README. You can get voice guidelines, right? It's not just your visual components and tokens, but you'll see here to make changes to the system, edit your code and rerun design sync from your code. So when designers get access to this, their first intuition is going to be make a design system to send to code, start in Claude Code, start in Cursor, run the skill the other way. It's going to run and process and change some of this. So it's pretty neat. I'll kind of flip through a couple examples so you see like what it has. And so it actually will make entire page level templates, that are interactive. These are just storybook components at their very core. You can see like the World Cup bracket, it's just working on different items that I knew were going to repeat a lot in various areas of the app. And there was back and forth, there was some discussion. And, I was like, the globe's a little off here. It's got a kind of a weird behavior. And Claude is automatically, and this kind of is why I was asking about the skills, is that Claude is automatically documenting per component a set of details that get packaged up and come with the component each time it's queried. So you'll see this in the thinking a lot, which is nice when you do, inspect that or interrogate it. And then you can jump out and, if you click edit, it'll open up a terminal session and you can just paste in a prompt that targets that exact component.
Gotcha.
So these are some of the states. And I wanted to just switch to code and show how if I change something there, run the design sync, we can keep talking just to show people how it works. You'll notice there's this like super ugly orange color. That's the current detail. I'm going to change that and we'll see how it propagates through the system or something like that. Or maybe I'll introduce a new component. We can talk about it. But I'm going to
So
switch it.
and as you do this, just to say the process back to you, if I was to start a new project, you're building your skeleton in Claude Code, in terminal, whatever you're choosing is, and then you're getting that into a steady state or a state that you like, and then you're transitioning that to now Claude Design. And then what are you doing, I guess, within Claude Design? So what did that just get you?
That's still a very open question for me, leading to why I'm like questioning why storybooks still. Why does there need to be the intermediary at all when, in my view, over the past 3 years, taking a page out of the kind of crypto community book, I adhere more to code as law than I do other lines of thinking at this point. So, for example, if I have a storybook that I'm managing or a Claude Design that I'm managing, invariably it'll be out of sync at some point, unless they're just the same system. So I'm asking the same question. I think it has to do with distribution channels for Claude and Anthropic. I think they're selling to two customers.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
that they're separate teams, as Keith often points out. They're just probably in different offices.
Yeah, well,
I'm
I
not
also
sure.
always point out too that I'm complaining about this how it's connecting between the two products, but like I'm firmly in the Claude Code camp, and this product I'm almost 100% convinced is just not for me. Like I could use it absolutely, I could do these designs or whatever, but like I think it's for existing design teams that are far larger and are trying to coordinate with this stuff. But it's also not the best product in that regard, so I don't really know what they're trying to do. But they must be doing something because they keep releasing new shit for it.
Well, and I think there is something to be said. Like you mentioned the animation piece, Eli. again, like a strong opinionated harness, gets you a lot farther than, whatever skills or anything else you might have embedded into just a Claude Code project,
Yep,
right?
I agree. So with Claude Code, what I do with this is Eli puts stuff together and I pull it as like the example. So it works well off an example. But when I've also been doing all my presentations out of this, which is awesome because now I come with slide decks to everything. Uh and it's Eli had like a design system around slide decks, so like it uses that. But then I always create it in Claude Code on my own, and then I have like a skill that syncs it to the Claude design up on the web. And then I always have it run a last prompt of like clean it up in this harness because it absolutely doesn't miss little fucking things on the design. Like Claude.
Mhm.
Eli, I really like I like your split view of the Earth. Like
Thanks.
that came out super sweet.
Yeah, and, I'm trying to get it to where, like, you can click and drag it like a marble, right, or spin it, and some of the click interactions could get better, but you see how, like, we're kinda centering
Hmm.
each of the matchups, and, I mean, this is all Opus just looping overnight. So if you haven't come across this, the new loop command to run a prompt on an interval, I'll literally write something dumb, Jake, that's like, "Loop until the UX is better," and, like, just come back 6 hours later. And so a lot of this is uninterrupted overnight looping right now, which kind of results in certain things like this, right? This layout's not nearly as resolved, but the data's accurate now. So you kinda sometimes it makes trade-offs like that. I can't really use these approaches in production, I would say, yet.
Well,
And I
you can't promise work and use it in production. Like it's not that the stuff that it outputs is necessarily too bad for production. It's just like it takes weird paths to get there, and it's the equivalent in my mind of like telling a person to do it, and you come back and you didn't give them any direction during the process whatsoever, and then you come back and it's like just as good as your original directions may have been, and you might not have known when you gave those directions what they were going to encounter. And so you have to
Yeah.
you have to unwind it before you talk to anybody about it. That's my new rule.
yeah, and what you'll see here is Jake, it had, like, control of a whole deployment environment as well. So this is what's up on Fly now and available, and that's actually the X API polling those countries that are playing right now. So you'll see, like, when a team scores, like, their country will get a bigger sphere on it, was the idea.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so it's even tracking, like, trending hashtags, telling you how much Twitter activity is going on per country, kind of as you zoom in on them or focus on them. So you can't really see that in my preview environments that I set up. So there is some, like, Keith is much more adept at actual, like, keeping these things full stack ready to go. I find myself sometimes, like, pushing on the design, messing with the UI, changing the system consistency kind of level. I'll put a PR up. Then oftentimes Keith's agent is like sort of working and resolving underneath me almost, or kind of almost like a backstop, right? He's just making sure I don't fall on my face, which I really support, or appreciate. But I just also wanted to mention here, when you do, let me switch over to what the result was. I just want y'all to see kind of the conclusion. So, I asked about the orange. I'm asking it to change it. It went and found it in the system that was provided by, Claude Code, or sorry, Claude Design. Um, it's currently testing the result that it got to. We should see it now right here locally. So all that's done. It should prompt me and talk about how we need to sync this to the design system. And so it doesn't appear to be giving me those instructions. You kind of just have to, like, stay on top of it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say, I just want to show you /design sync. So it'll push the system over to Claude Design. It bundles it into Storybook. I can move this just so people can see this. It's pretty slick. Or a bare package, uploads it. In this case, since it already exists, it should just update. And I'm like, if I wasn't kind of to the point of like, how do we keep up with this? Like, if I wasn't reading their Twitter posts and then their Discord, I don't think I would know about this yet, you know? And so I'm hoping the promises, you know, become more real because I don't quite see it yet. To your point of like, what do I just win?
Well, and I
I
mean, this is a good sharing moment for sure, because you banged your head against the wall for 2 hours trying to figure it out. Hopefully, other folks don't, and then that speeds up their learning process. And that's I think one of the more fun things of this era is just being able to share workflows or snippets and things like that. Yeah, I mean it's very similar. Like if you're having to sync back and forth, it's similar to like if I find an issue with one of my side projects and it fixes it, and my immediate thought, and I don't know how other people approach it, but it's like, hey, what caused this? How did you fix it? How can we prevent it from happening again? And then document, like update all documentation is
yeah.
what I do a lot. And like, does this need a skill? Does this need like what's going to help the most? Don't let AI just guide you of, oh, I fixed it, you're good. It's like, no, this is going to happen
No,
again.
because the more tokens it takes for it to have gotten to that solution, the more paths there probably were for it to take that, and it'll just take 10 different ways to do the same solution, like, every time, right? And so, I mean, since, like, my biggest use of the loop command is, like, since they added and this was very recent, maybe, like, in the last month, where all, like, Cursor, Codex, and Claude Code can all read the previous sessions now, or even the active ones that are running.
Mhm.
So I have one that's looping that's constantly saying, look for me doing stupid shit. I don't really know entirely what the skill says, but the
Well,
purpose
and
of the skill is to generate more skills or amend current documentation and skills as the AI gets like stuck on shit. It's not necessarily to unblock it.
I mean, this illustrates it perfectly, right? You see here, I ran a command that I literally ran an hour ago. Like I tested this to make sure I was ready to hang out with Jake. Run it again. It's telling me it can't authenticate. It's saying, oh, you've got to enable design system access via Claude terminal /design login. Why would that just not be in the skill?
Well,
So
this
now,
very specific thing, dude, Claude has gotten very, very pushy. I got a session closed this week saying I was a cybersecurity risk. So since like last week, they've really made it just be like, nah, I'm not gonna. It used to just figure that out. And now
uh,
it's like, do you want to do this? And it's like been stopping me a lot this week, very in particular, saying that it's not even that I was doing anything wrong. I guess if it was like not my computer, I guess I'm a little mean to it, so maybe I sounded like an attacker.
I mean, maybe, but I did reauthorize it, so I'll try to close this loop before we get off the call. I know we're almost at the end of our time here.
Another thing about loops, I guess, and at least like repeatable patterns, because you get stuck on. I'm sure you guys like one of my favorite things is as soon as a new model comes out, I immediately run that new model against all of my existing projects. Like Fable came out, crushed. I immediately ran 3 different instances. Check out this project. What can you enhance? What can you improve? What's the issues that you want to solve? And so, but if you want repeatable things and you write the right skills and you're doing loops, you have to have the framework in place that it can follow, or else like 2 years, Eli, it added orange and you're like, well, this is, and who knows how long, that was an easy fix. But like I've let things run against established projects in long settings, like especially when Fable came out, and I was just like, "Yep, make the fix, make the fix, make the fix." Long processes, and then I check it live, and it did a bunch of weird UI things that like I wasn't because I was like SEO optimized, right? And it's like, well, we're gonna put this big block on top of every article that you've written, that, does an about or a TLDR. And it's like, well, that's not the right experience. But yet it drove it across, because I was, sort of went outside the parameters. But I guess what I'm saying to folks is like, don't run a loop and then without the framework in place or the things you want to follow, and then expect that you're not going to be spending that same amount of time cleaning up
Yeah,
the issues. Like,
I would say like that the don't run it without like a clear validation function that the AI knows about, not just you, right? So if you run it as like, make the UX better, it's going to define that based off what's like already in there. And the way I've been solving this in code is certainly with like playwright tests, but I've been using playwright tests in a way that definitively would have been so stupid in the past. But like I wrote a test today, or I let the AI write a test today that banned a certain yellow from the page because it was in our old palette and I wanted it gone. And it kept trying to reintroduce it. And so I have a literal test. It's just like, is this page yellow? No. But that would be a dumb test to write as a human. But that's kind of where my head's at is like if you start to build that up over time, like as the project goes along, it starts to be a little bit more deterministic, but it's still not deterministic, obviously. But as it learns from what other people do, like what's in that repo allows it to see. So sometimes there's benefits in writing validation functions or having tests that just don't make sense to humans.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And you can always add the evaluation step at the end of all the things and then clearly define. So like when I was creating articles for my lawn care site, I don't know how many iterations of articles I went through until I was like finally happy, and then how many steps of evaluation I implemented before I was finally happy, and then I was like, okay, now go crank out 10, and then I'm gonna review all 10 you created, and I did that multiple times until I was finally like, okay, I could set you on a cron job, and I trust you now to create 2 good articles a week that I'm not going to look at anymore because I had to put up all that time up front to like ensure that the guardrails were in place, the right things and everything else. So
There are cooler things, but I've just been on that same journey.
yeah,
Keith is serving that.
The goals, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of plugins and skills and support Keith is sort of parachuting in is just insane, honestly.
it's not easy. I mean, there's work associated as much as we want to say that it's so much easier. If you want to do it right and if you want to do it in a repeatable manner and if you want it to be 100% autonomous, there's a lot of work that goes into the trust of, all right, well, it's all yours now. But there's 10 hours that, went into that one thing.
Thank you for listening. We are so happy to have you here. Thank you to Jake for joining.